think you might be muted.
All right, there I am. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for our talk on our symposium on the Stamford Charter. And we're so glad to have with us to speak more on that Representative Jonathan Jacobson. Because we don't want to prolong the time, we're going to invite Jonathan Jacobson to come now. Do me a favor, though. Like this, share both on Facebook and YouTube to let others know that we are on. It is important that we get the information out. An educated voter, I believe, an informed voter is an educated voter, is a smart voter, and so we need to make sure we do that. I'm so glad that Pastor Bradley is with us today as well. And Pastor Jackson, Robert Jackson, is tied up, but he is with us as well. So without further ado, turning it over to Representative Jonathan Jacobson. Representative Jacobson.
Thank you so much, Reverend, and thank you and to Pastor Bradley and Jackson for giving me the opportunity to come here and explain to folks about what's been going on, what's with all the lawn signs, all the mailers, all the drama that's going on with the charter revision process. So as you mentioned, my name is Jonathan Jacobson. I am a member of the Stamford Board of Representatives, which is basically Stamford City Council, and I have been involved in the charter revision process from the very beginning. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to be a educational, foundational exercise to basically give the overview of what's going on in town with the charter, what's being proposed, and why it's so controversial. So without further ado, let's get started. November 7th, 2023 charter vote. Tonight we're going to talk about what is the charter, how is the charter amended, the role of the Board of Representatives in the charter revision process, the role of the Charter Commission in the charter revision process, why there has been so much controversy, and the proposed revisions that we will all be voting on next month. So first, what is the charter? Well, the charter is the equivalent of Stamford's Constitution. Like the United States government has a federal constitution, the state of Connecticut has a state constitution, our city constitution is called the charter. The Connecticut Supreme Court has said that as agents of the city, including the Board of Representatives, have no source of authority beyond the charter, which means the charter is the source, it is the beating heart of the very foundation of our government. How is the charter amended? Well, the charter itself explains that there should be a mandatory review of all the provisions of and amendments to the charter undertaken at 10-year intervals by a charter revision commission. Every 10 years, a charter revision commission has to be established in order to review the charter and make some proposed changes to how our government functions. It also says that the provision of this section shall in no way impinge upon the appointments of interim charter revision commissions when, in the discretion of the Board of Representatives, such appointment shall be deemed desirable. That's a lot of legalese for there should be reviews every 10 years, but it doesn't have to be every 10 years. The Board of Representatives can establish a revision to the charter when it deems necessary. But what is the Board of Representatives? Well, as I mentioned, it's Stamford City Council. And Stamford is divided into 20 different municipal districts, city districts, each of which has 2 representatives. I am one of 2 representatives in my district, District 12, which is one of 20 municipal districts in the city, which means that our city council has 40 separate representatives representing 20 different districts. So what's the role of the board in the charter revision process? Well, first of all, its responsibility is to appoint the members to that commission. Remember, the commission is a separate body, separate and distinct from the board, designed to review the charter. And their membership, they're called commissioners. So one of the first jobs of the Board of Representatives is to appoint commissioners. In addition, they have oversight over the commission and its legal counsel. Finally, the Board of Representatives has the ability to vote on whatever proposed changes come out from the Charter Commission to be advanced onto the ballot at what's called a referendum. A referendum is when the public, we, have an opportunity to go into the voting booth and vote directly for whatever changes is on the ballot at that given election. What is the Charter Commission? Well, it is 5 to 15 commissioners appointed by the Board of Representatives. Their job is to deliberate, conduct public hearings, and ultimately vote on what they recommend to have as proposed changes to our city charter, our constitution. So, to sum it all up, the Board of Representatives appoints commissioners to the Charter Commission. The Charter Commission proposes the changes that it suggests be made to the charter, which is also known as a report. The Board of Representatives then decides what in the report should go on the ballot. And then finally, the public, we, get the opportunity to approve or reject whatever proposed amendments are on the ballot at the referendum. So, with that foundation in mind, why so much controversy? Well, in order to know that, you first have to do analysis of Stamford Politics 101, which also involves the composition of the Charter Commission, the contents of the Charter Commission's final report, the wording that's contained on the ballot, and the date of the referendum. Stamford Politics 101. Stamford's Democratic Party's control. For better or for worse, Stamford's elected government is overwhelmingly Democrats. The mayor, the Board of Representatives, the Board of Finance, and the Board of Education are all Democrats. As a result, most of Stamford's political discourse is caused by inter-party dispute, as opposed to intra, which we see usually on the federal level, Democrats and Republicans. Here in Stamford, it's usually within the Democratic Party that makes the most controversy. I'll also note that of the 40 members of the Board of Representatives, 36 are elected as Democrats. Reform Stamford. Some of you might have heard this before. Following the 2016 election, there was an influx of young, politically active individuals. Originally, their platform was to expand the membership of the local Stamford Democratic Party. I felt at that time that that was the right move. I believed in the platform then, and I believe in it now. Over time, however, those that associated with what they would then call themselves as Reform Stamford shifted their focus. That focus was more towards a stronger oversight and skepticism of the mayor's office, as well as a general opposition to what would be characterized as pro-development land use policies. On the current Board of Representatives, the one that was elected in 2021, the Reform Stamford faction and its supporters within the Democratic Party took the majority of the board. As a result, the president of the Board of Representatives has the ability to assign members of the Board of Representatives to committees. Most Board of Representative committees have a Reform Stamford, or what I would characterize as a reform-friendly majority. That list of committees includes the Charter Revision Committee. That committee's responsibilities include setting the foundation for the Charter Commission, interviewing and recommending candidates for appointment, drafting a preliminary charge to the Commission of certain proposed changes they would like to see addressed during the charter revision process. composition of the Charter Revision, the Charter Commission, excuse me. There were 61 applications and 58 candidates were interviewed for the 15 seats that were available for the commission. Each member of the committee, per our rules, were given up to 15 votes for the 58 candidates. In other words, 1 vote for each of the 15 available seats. This, however, was not followed. Some members of the commission voted for over 40 different folks to sit on the commission. When I asked about it, I was not given a clear result as to why that took place. I do not know if that was intentional or a mistake, but in my view, it was a problem and a flaw in the process right out of the gate. Ultimately, the Board of Representatives selected 15 commissioners. I voted no, and I voted against the appointment of these commissioners due to the flaws in the process. Who did the Board of Representatives pick for the Charter Revision Commission? Well, we have several folks. I'll leave them on screen for a moment. No need to read through them all individually. But of the 41 applicants, of all the 60 some odd applicants, 41 of them were Democrats. Of the 15 members, 8 are Democrats. There are 6 Republicans and 1 unaffiliated. Some important background to know. Land use opposition. Now, in Stamford, we have something that's called a zoning board. Like other towns, it's a board of individuals that make decisions relating to land use policies. And sometimes when there are certain applications, the public has an opportunity to be heard in front of those applications. And from July of 2021 to September of 2022, there were 20 applications before the zoning board. Of those 20 applications, there were 264 separate and distinct statements in opposition from 57 people during that period. Of those 57 people, 14 gave a total of 188 negative comments. In other words, 71% of all negative comments between July of 21 and September of 22 came from only 14 people. A frequent complaint from these 14 people was overdevelopment. Of the 14, 6 were selected as commissioner. Additional background, political allies of the Reform Stamford movement. Of the 15 commissioners selected, 2 ran primary campaigns for the Board of Representatives just last month, supported by Reform Stamford. 1 commissioner was elected to a vacancy on the Board of Education by the Reform Majority Board of Representatives over the endorsement of the mayor, Caroline Simmons, as well as the overwhelming majority, if not the unanimous majority, of the Stamford Democratic Party. And 2 other commissioners often voted with or sided with Reform Stamford while they were members of the Board of Representatives from 2017 to 2021. This evidences to me that the Charter Commission was stacked with individuals that were either allied to or had similar policy goals as Reform Stamford. Preparing the report of proposed revisions. Now, drafting of the report. So now we're at a point in time where the commissioners have been appointed. Now it's time for the Board of Representatives and the commission to draft their report. Now, during this time, the public and elected officials are invited to submit recommendations to amend the charter. Certain of them were rejected by either the Board of Representatives or the Charter Commission. They include reducing the size of the Board of Representatives from 40 to 26, and to amend the election of the Board of Representatives so only 1 seat is open every 2 years, as opposed to voting for both representatives at the same time every 4 years. These two are just examples of many, many others that were suggested by former mayors, city officials, and members of the public that, through the collective wisdom of the Board of Representatives and the Charter Commission, are not on the ballot for your or by vote next month. After months of deliberation, the Charter Commission drafted a preliminary report of their proposed changes for a public hearing. Despite substantial negative feedback from the public and negative input and feedback from the mayor, the commission made almost no material revisions to their draft report, which led to their submission of their final report. Now, I'm going to pull up a copy of that report, or their final proposal. And Reverend, if you can help me out by allowing me to share my screen. There we go. This is the 195-page document that the Charter Revision Commission proposes we revise the charter to be. Now, I'm not going to go through all of it, but if I jump past the index, you can see that this is what's called a red line, which means everything that you see in red or maybe green is a proposed change to our city's constitution, the charter.
Jonathan?
Yes, sir.
Is it possible that you can enlarge that so we can see it better?
Happily. So I'm not going to go through all the documents. I'm not going to fly through this thing, but this just gives you a sense of the depth of changes, the scope of changes, because each and every one of these changes is what we're voting on next month. And all this information is publicly available, and I'm happy to share the link to you so that each and every person watching this has the opportunity to read for themselves exactly what changes are being proposed. And if you could help me share the screen again, please, Reverend. Thank you. The most notable at the time change to the charter was a provision which allowed any 300 landowners from anywhere in the city to appeal certain decisions of the Planning and Zoning Board to the Board of Representatives. Now, this is a very important issue that is unique only to our city and technically Westport, but really nowhere else in the state. Now, I mentioned earlier that the city of Stamford has land use boards like the zoning board and the planning board. There are other boards in the city like the Board of Ethics, and these are folks that don't get elected, like the mayor or the Board of Representatives. These folks get appointed, where the mayor nominates these individuals for appointment, and they get confirmed by the legislature, the Board of Representatives, very much like how at the federal level, the president nominates a Supreme Court judge who gets confirmed by the Senate. Now, why is it done this way? Well, there's a strong policy consideration under why we don't want folks that are in charge of land use boards to not be subject to an election. Because for years, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, these land use boards would make decisions influenced by their constituents, the people that voted them into office. And oftentimes, there was a discriminatory intent, a discriminatory purpose, and a discriminatory effect regarding land use decisions based on the color of someone's skin or their socioeconomic background. The logic would be that if we have people that are not subject to the whims of what could be the vocal minority, to insulate them from that populace, then they would be able to make impartial, unbiased decisions for the benefit of our community as a whole. In Stamford, or let me back up a second, I apologize. When those boards make decisions, sometimes they can be appealed. And most of the time, the appeal has to go to the state superior court. Have a judge decide whether or not the decision should be overturned. But in Stamford, there's a unique provision that says that a certain percentage of landowners can sign a petition if they live within a certain distance from the site that's subject to the planning or zoning board's decision. They, in turn, can then submit that petition not to the superior court, but to the legislature, to the Board of Representatives, so that the elected officials can make the decision as to whether or not that land use decision should be upheld or not. I believe that that provision is contradictory to that established historical practice of wanting to ensure that elected individuals do not have says in land use processes because of the potential for influence from the electorate. With that being said, that is currently in our charter, but the proposal that's being referred to here would have made it a lot easier for that process to be undertaken. So instead of having a percentage of landowners that live near the property, the proposal would be to allow any 300 landowners in the city to appeal the decision from any other place in the city. So for example, I represent parts of Glenbrook, Springdale, and downtown. And let's say an affordable housing complex was approved to go up in a part of my neighborhood. Well, under this proposal, 150 folks from North Stamford and 150 folks from Japan could block that by signing a petition, sending it to the Board of Representatives to appeal it. And 300 people out of a city of 130 plus thousand is less than a fraction of 1%. To say that this proposal was controversial is an understatement. Here are some influential folks who had some opinions on the subject. Our governor, Ned Lamont, said that this type of change was not needed. Our mayor, Caroline Simmons, said it was tyrannical and would essentially render our government dysfunctional. The Speaker of the House of the Connecticut General Assembly, the Connecticut legislature, and the Republican House GOP leader both issued a statement saying that this proposal appears to go further than state law allows. And a distinguished professor from Yale University School of Law, Annika Singh Lamar, characterized it as illegal and terrible public policy. The mayor was, at her behest, was able to have language inserted into a bill at the General Assembly at the state, which made certain land use proposals in the final report illegal. This has been referred to as a rat bill. So if anyone's been paying attention to the charter revision process and has heard things about the rat, this is what they're talking about how the General Assembly was able to get something into a language on a bill that lawmakers voted to approve. Evidently, they say they didn't have the time to read it or they just didn't get around to it. Some did, but ultimately it passed. My position has been and continues to be that I'm disappointed that the mayor felt that she had to stoop down to the Board of Representatives levels of politics to get this done. But I'm glad that she did it because this provision was just far, far too dangerous, in my view. Adoption of the final report. So there was a report that was proposed. The General Assembly in the state of Connecticut made certain provisions of it illegal, but the rest of it was fair game. So every proposal from that red line that we went through, everything other than the land use appeals, was sent to the Board of Representatives for the board, the office that I serve on, to decide which of them should appear on the ballot for vote. The question then became, how should they appear on the ballot? Now, historically, they're broken up piece by piece. Shall the charter be amended to A, yes or no? Shall the charter for B, yes or no? C, D, and so on. The majority of the Board of Representatives argues that that type of process, with the amount of changes that are being proposed, would be too confusing and overwhelming for the public to understand. I disagree. As a voter and as a representative representing thousands of voters in my district, I found that argument to be nothing short of insulting to the intelligence of the voters and their ability to determine which specific changes to the charter they think are and are not warranted. Ultimately, however, the board votes to create a single yes or no question, which means that 195-page document, each and every proposal therein, you have one vote to decide if we want it all or nothing. But how does the actual language on the ballot read? How could we possibly take all of those changes and condense it down to a single yes or no vote? Well, let's take a look. This is what it's going to say on the ballot, guys. Shall the charter be revised to clarify and make it easier for the public to understand, have access to, and hold more accountable Stamford's government by the following? A, create more opportunities for the public to participate in government. B, clarify, define, and make more understandable certain common terms in the charter. C, require clear reporting and accountability for legislative, legal, and fiscal matters. D, include recognition of diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI, as an important goal for the city. E, end the practice of allowing members of decision-making boards and commissions to remain in office beyond the expiration of their term. F, clarify the requirement that certain appointed executive officials live in Stamford, subject to a waiver provision. G, allow the Board of Representatives to obtain legal services as necessary, as do other local legislative bodies in Connecticut. H, create new charter boards and commissions to promote the goals of the American with Disabilities Act /DEI, mental health, housing, and harbor management. And finally, I, reorganize the budget process to permit residents to voice their opinions and concerns in a pre-budget public hearing, require publication of a budget calendar, and ensure compliance with state law. I'd like to break down what we just read piece by piece. But I'm going to go a little bit out of order because there are a couple of big ones here that influence my decision, and I would like to explain to you why. So I'm going to start with E. End the practice of allowing members of decision-making boards and commissions to remain in office beyond the expiration of their term. Now, remember, there are boards that have appointed members, zoning board, ethics, planning, so on and so forth. Those boards are only for a certain term. They expire. But our charter has a provision which basically allows those individuals to continue serving on the board after their expiration. Now, I think that's a problem. I think that's something that needs to be addressed and fixed. But as you're going to see shortly, the proposed change is far worse than the issue that currently exists. So, what do we currently have in place to make sure that these folks who are on appointed boards do not remain on the boards past the expiration of their service? Well, currently, there's a provision that says that the mayor has up to 120 days after the expiration of those members to submit the name of a replacement. That name gets submitted to the Board of Representatives, who gets the ability to confirm whether or not that person should take the appointed seats. So to the extent that the mayor, after 120 days, fails to even submit a nominee, well, then the president of the Board of Representatives gets the ability to nominate. The purpose of that rule is to protect our city from a dereliction of duty, for when the mayor fails to act when she is supposed to replace the individual whose term expired. But when you look at E, and it says to end the practice of allowing members of decision-making boards to remain in office, what's the actual proposal to end it? Well, here's what it is. The Board of Representatives can choose. Remember that before, it's when the mayor doesn't nominate someone to fill the seat, the president of the board can nominate, and then the Board of Representatives can confirm. Now, what's being proposed is if no one is confirmed, in other words, if the mayor sends a nominee to the Board of Representatives and the Board of Representatives votes that person down, refuses to confirm, after 120 days of doing so, then the president of the board can nominate a candidate for the Board of Representatives to then confirm. Further, if 120 days later, there's still nobody, then any member of the Board of Representatives can nominate their candidate along with the president of the board and along with the mayor all throughout the process. What this does is it runs afoul of something that's called advice and consent, the established American principle that the executive nominates and the legislature confirms. Let's put this into context in the federal level. Imagine that you have a Democrat president and a Republican Senate, and a Supreme Court vacancy is created because a justice resigns. Well, normally what happens is the president submits a nominee and the Senate can either confirm or reject. And if they reject, then the seat remains vacant until the president is able to get somebody else that the Senate can confirm. What happens if the Republican Senate, under this hypothetical circumstances, keeps voting down that justice time and time again because they know that after 120 days, they can say, aha, you were unable to get somebody past who we wanted. Now we get to choose. That's exactly what's being proposed at our local level. It creates an incentive for the Board of Representatives to reject mayoral nominees. This is a drastic, unprecedented shift in the balance of power to our city's government, the likes of which I am not aware of ever seeing before anywhere in the history of our country. And I do not believe it is appropriate for Stamford, Connecticut, the best and most important city in the state, to be the experiment. There's a second issue that I have with the proposed charter changes, and that's G, which allows the Board of Representatives to obtain legal services as necessary, as do other local legislative bodies in Connecticut. Well, there's a problem with this language because reading this suggests that the Board of Representatives does not have the ability to obtain legal services like other legislative bodies in Connecticut. Guess what? We do. The charter already allows the board to obtain what's called outside counsel. Now, it is a high burden. It has to be submitted by the president of the Board of Representatives, along with the clerk of the board, the majority and minority leader, and then has to be voted on by 27 out of 40 representatives. Some argue that we need to lower that threshold. Some argue that the Board of Representatives should be able to hire their own counsel when any one representative submits a request to do so. And you need a mere majority of anybody at a national meeting to vote for it. I think this is a dangerous move. I think that the reason that it's so difficult for the Board of Representatives to commit itself to hiring its own attorney is because we as a city want to make sure that there's a darn good reason to do so. The city of Stamford already has what's called a law department. The client of the law department is the city of Stamford and all of its boards, commissions, and its mayor. So if there's a reason to hire a new lawyer, separate and distinct from the law department, who has to get paid with taxpayer money, if we're going to allow this 40-person part-time volunteer city council to make that type of commitment, the policy is that there should be a little bit more of a hurdle to get over if we're going to get there, because it has to be a good reason. The current proposal on this ballot is to make it a lot easier to occur. I will also note that the Board of Representatives in the last 5 to 6 years has incurred upwards of close to $500,000 in legal fees as a result of expenses to outside counsel. That's $500,000 of taxpayer money that arguably could have been used for alternative, if not better, purposes. But that's not all that this is proposing. In addition to making it easier to hire outside counsel, the charter proposes that we allow the Board of Representatives to have its own law department, separate from corporation counsel. Now, the argument behind why that's needed is because it's claimed that there's a conflict of interest, that the law department serves the mayor, not the Board of Representatives. Well, that's not true. That's not true. The main attorney, the corporation counsel, is an executive appointed position who serves at the pleasure of the mayor. But the department and the ethical obligation of all those attorneys is to all the boards. The Board of Representatives has been in existence since 1948. And as an attorney, I cannot see any conflict of interest that is posed by virtue of the fact that corporation counsel is appointed by the mayor when the client is the city, its commissions, and its boards. Worse is that in making this proposal, the charter is silent as to the responsibilities of our current law department. In other words, if this passes, the Board of Representatives will get its own law department. It'll have the easier time to obtain outside counsel. And all the while, our corporation counsel will continue to represent the city of Stamford and the Board of Representatives. We could potentially have 3 different lawyers representing the Board of Representatives at one time. And who's paying for that? Us, the taxpayer. And usually in Stamford, the budgeting process has checks and balances where the mayor can oversee. We have another board specifically for it called the Board of Finance, and then the Board of Representatives. It's a nice little triangle to ensure fiscal responsibility. But what's being proposed here is to cut the mayor's office and the Board of Finance out, to let the Board of Representatives be in control of its own attorney's budget. In my view, too much potential for unchecked legal fees. Again, close to $500,000 in the last 5 to 6 years alone. Worse, so I think the language on the ballot here is improper. This is not just misleading. In my view, I think it's deceptive. Because nowhere on this ballot does it say anything about us having the ability to obtain legal services. And I'm not aware of any other municipality in Connecticut that has both a corporation counsel and a separate and distinct law department for its municipal legislature. But let's now go to the rest. A, create more opportunities for the public to participate in government. Well, that sounds great. When you read the charter, it seems that it mandates, if not encourages, more remote meetings. And I think having public engagement via remote technology is fantastic. However, I think public meetings by elected officials are not. We've been remote since COVID-19, and about half the Board of Representatives do not have their cameras on. Worse, when they don't have their cameras on, you can hear a lot of talk in the background with hot microphones, specifically telling folks how to vote. It is the opposite of transparency. And I have concerns about this type of requirement and how it would affect our board's business. B, clarify, define, and make more understandable certain common terms in the charter. Well, that's nice to have definitions, such as the Board of Representatives, charter, and mayor. It's useful to have terms like this in a legal document, as complicated as the charter, but we shouldn't be treating this like a major accomplishment of having one of its own section on the ballot, especially when so many other proposed changes are simply missing or not adequately referenced on the ballot itself. C, require clear reporting and accountability for legislative, legal, and fiscal matters. This requires the mayor to report immediately to the Board of Finance and the Board of Representatives all legislative items and proposals, including but not limited to those which may impact the governance and financial well-being of the city, whether introduced by the city or otherwise. This seems like transparency, but here's what I'm afraid is going to happen. Whenever any mayor discusses proposed legislation with a member of Congress, or governor, or their aides, the mayor must immediately report it to our boards. Politics happen. People politic, they talk, they have discussions, they make deals. That's how partly we were able to benefit as a city for the last 10, 15, 20 years. My concern is that no one's going to want to talk to the mayor if they know that the mayor has to have every conversation reported. In other words, it's going to have a potential chilling effect on the progress of our city. There are additional reporting requirements for corporation counsel and the directors of our administration, our lawyers, and our chief financial officer, which don't necessarily sound so bad. D, include recognition of diversity, equity, and inclusion as an important goal for the city. This is great, but when you actually look at it, there's two problems. One, it's only mentioned twice in the proposed charter. One is in what's called the preamble that has no force or effect. And second, is that it basically says that we're going to leave this to be decided by a future ordinance. The commission shall exercise such additional powers, duties, and authority as may be set forth by ordinance. Ordinance is basically a statute, a law that's passed at the city level. That ordinance has not yet been drafted, and it's unclear what it will say or do. Second, the commission for DEI can be done by ordinance itself. We do not have to amend the charter to create commissions like DEI. We have the ability to do that now, and I think we should do that now. But the charter changes that we vote on should be substantive. They should be actual proposals that affect us now, not promises of future act of we're going to create this department and fill in the blanks later. Going a little bit out of order to H, but they're related, which is the creation of 4 new commissions: the American with Disabilities Act DEI Commission, Mental Health, Housing, and Harbor Management. These share the same problems as the last one. Generally have no defined duties and no actual power. They can be simply created by ordinance, not a charter revision, and they do not explain what the actual goals are. They're promises of future acts. F, clarify the requirement that certain appointed executive officials live in Stamford, subject to a waiver position. This would require certain positions in Stamford to be residents of Stamford. They include public safety, chief of police, fire, corporation counsel, and personnel. In my view, we want the best people for the job. Do we want the best candidates, or do we want the best locals? Currently, the Board of Representatives is free to make a determination when they accept or reject candidates for these offices based on their residency. My concern is that by making it a requirement in our charter, we'll discourage out-of-town candidates from applying, thereby reducing the pool of qualified candidates for these incredibly important roles, which can only hurt us as a city. And finally, reorganize the budget process to permit residents to voice their opinions and concerns in a pre-budget public hearing, require publication of a budget calendar, and ensure compliance with state law. Well, if you actually read the proposed changes, it is a complete overhaul of how our budgeting process is undertaken. Now, I'm all for more public engagement. Don't get me wrong. But the new process is at best confusing. My concern that there's going to be far too many unanticipated consequences relating to the overhaul of a process that, in my view, is not flawed. As my grandmother would always tell me, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Here's some important proposals to the charter that if the yeses carry, we vote yes on, goes into effect, that aren't mentioned anywhere on the ballot. They include compensating the acting mayor during the first 30 days of the mayor's absence or disability. Guess who that is? The president of the Board of Representatives, or in his absence, any other member of the board that the board selects. Modification to our city's pension plans, additional qualifications for certain appointed officials, and the Board of Representatives having the ability to hire experts and professional advisors other than legal counsel. Again, without fiscal oversight. So to sum up what we got, a single yes or no question, which does not sufficiently address all of the changes in the charter, inadequately describes the changes actually proposed, which leads to the last issue of controversy that we have time for this evening, the date of the referendum, the date of the vote. Our charter has a provision that says, to the extent permissible under applicable law, the board shall endeavor to schedule the referendum on any proposed charter amendments or revisions to coincide, to be at the same time as a general election, which the mayor, state officials, or federal officials are to be elected. There is no dispute that the November 7, 2023 election does not satisfy this provision of the charter. Our lawyers, the city council, advised us that putting it on the 2023 ballot would be illegal. Notwithstanding that advice, advocates for putting it on 2023 argued that the language in the charter is merely preferential, not mandatory. I take exception to that because the idea that a document like the charter gives suggestions is like saying that when the federal constitution says that you have to be free from searches and seizures, or you have to have due process of law, those aren't preferences. Those don't say we would really like you to do it, but it doesn't matter if you don't. That's the same type of comparison here. Things in the charter, they don't say preferences, they're requirements. 2023 advocates also argued that the public, you, me, don't have enough bandwidth for political education to learn about all these issues and be able to vote in a presidential election. Again, I find that argument nothing short of insulting, which is why I and several other members of the board argue that 2024 is the appropriate time to vote on this. The charter demands it. The public would have more time to digest that massive 195-page document that has proposals that aren't even on the ballot. A higher turnout in a presidential election as compared to the 2023 election, which is purely local. By way of comparison, 4 years ago in 2019, the voter turnout was 19% versus 2020, the last presidential election, which had 80%. The difference in voter turnout is massive. And we would want to have a higher turnout to maximize a democratic result. Finally, it would expose us to litigation if this carries, there's inevitably going to be a lawsuit saying that it's illegal to be done in 2023. That could not only cost a ton of legal fees, but it may invalidate everything that's been done, a complete waste of time and resources. And worse yet, because our law department advised us not to do it and we did it anyways, well, they are now conflicted out. And we would have to hire another attorney to represent us to defend the decision to put it on 2023 as opposed to 2024. I argue that the true purpose of 2023 is specifically to maximize the chances of getting this passed. You don't need to be a student of political science to know that the political minority tend to do better in off years. In my view, that's exactly why 2023 was proposed as opposed to 2024, which has the 80% likely voter turnout. Ultimately, the Board of Representatives put it on the ballot in merely 2 months. So, my final thoughts. I will be voting no. In my view, the process has been rigged from the beginning. It has been politically biased. The results appear to have been predetermined by the majority of the Board of Representatives. Many proposals to the charter are solutions looking for problems to fix. There is no valid reason to force through in 2023 against the express language of the charter and the advice of our attorneys. There is no valid reason to make it a single yes or no vote. These issues should make an informed voter ask why the process is happening the way that it is. And I will close out by pointing out some prominent community leaders who will be voting no. Mayor Caroline Simmons, former Mayor David Martin, Reverend Dr. Joseph Ford, Reverend Dr. Andre Bradley, Reverend Dr. Robert A. Jackson, Reverend Mark Lingle, Reverend Winton Hill, Reverend Michael Hyman, Juanita James, Ellen Bromley, Janine Burke, and Sandy Goldstein, among many, many others. So thank you for taking the opportunity to listen to me this evening. I hope you stay informed, and I hope that you vote. Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you so much, Representative Jacobson. I think this was very informational, informative, and it will help us decide on our own whether we believe we should vote for or against. I think that's the important thing, that we should have the information so we can make our own decision on what we feel is the best for the city. I want to thank you. This is the first meeting that we'll have, but I'm hoping Representative Jacobson, I can get you to come back along with some others so we can go more in depth and talking about the charter and what's actually what effects the actual proposal will have on the city, if that's all right with you.
It would be my pleasure, Reverend. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I just want to encourage everyone to know what's going on and to be present. Pastor Robert Jackson will be presenting a community conversation with Mayor Carolyn Simmons on this coming Monday, October 23rd at 6:30 p.m. At Bethel AME Church. We encourage everyone to come out and take part in this. If you can, we ask that you would get the word out, share it, and so we can have the best turnout as possible. What we'll do, Representative Jacobson, this was great. Again, it was the last minute. As a matter of fact, this was a result of what we heard on Monday from the NAACP. And I was kind of disappointed because it gave reasons why we should vote, yet it didn't explain anything that was in the charter. And tonight you've given us a better understanding of the changes that are being requested, that are up for revision. And so I thank you for that on today. I think that's it. Is there anything you would like to say before we close out? Anything else?
Just that a democracy is only as good as the people that are involved. And I think that everybody should be aware of what's happening, educate yourself, and make your own informed decision. The way that I see it, these proposed changes, lumping it all in together in one in an off year with some of the drastic shifts in power that's being proposed is just too far. If you have problems with city government, nothing's perfect. I think the way that you do it is to fix it at the voting booth, not to change the rules of the game, and especially not to do it at a time when most people aren't looking.
All right. Well, thank you again. I want to thank you, Representative Jacobson. I want to thank Pastor Bradley and Pastor Robert Jackson for coming in on this as well. And then we have a few other representatives that are part of this on tonight. Representative Don Mays, Representative Eric Morrison, Emil Goldberg, and Dan Sanford. We thank you guys for joining us on today. Representative Don, I see you have your video on. Is there anything you would like to say or comment?
Let me unmute myself. I think Jonathan did an excellent job of presenting the information that I think people really need. This has been, in talking to constituents, this has been such a confusing issue without enough information out there as to what is really being voted on. So I'm very happy that Jonathan put together a good explanation. And as you can tell, it is complicated, but it was also a system that was rigged against what I consider to be good democracy. So I also am going to be joining Jonathan in voting no and encouraging my constituents to vote no.
Excellent, excellent. Are there any other representatives that's on right now that would like to say anything? Representative Morrison? No? So what we will be doing is later on this week, we will be re-showing this and rebroadcasting it, getting it out, getting the word out. I see Representative Don Sanford just came on. I'm going to add you, Representative Sanford. Is there anything you'd like to say?
No, I think everyone has done a terrific job. And I just, I thought Jonathan did a fantastic job of really breaking down the bullet points to try to really explain what is happening and how important it is and the significance of it. So I really, my question was if you were going to be able to share that so that we can help kind of get the message out and just let people know, to be more informed and more educated about, how important this vote is on November 7th. So I appreciate you hosting it, and I appreciate Jonathan for putting together that fantastic presentation. And I really thought he really nailed a lot of the important parts of some of the big concerns that a lot of us have with what's being presented to us. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And it is shared. You can go to Faith's Facebook page, which is facebook.com/FaithTabCT, or you can go to Faith's YouTube page as well, which is youtube.com/FaithTabCT2109. And they will be both there. And we encourage you to share so we can get the word out. I think the more opportunities we have to share, the more people we can reach and let them know what's really going on.
I just wrote it down. Thank you so much.
So
You're
if
welcome.
I could just jump in to mention one thing, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. This is Emil Goldberg. I'm the representative for District 13. I think one of the most important things that Jonathan didn't mention was he used the term the Board of Reps did this, the Board of Reps did that. What he probably out of good manners didn't mention to you is that it was a very divided board. I encourage all of you to go look at the record. our legislative record and see who voted how. And what you're going to find out is that most of these votes that put what is arguably not our best process forward to you were done with very, very narrow majorities. So go have a look, realize that there's not as much unanimity as the yes vote would like you to think there is, and put on your critical thinking cap. So thank you for letting me share my thoughts. I thank Jonathan for his usual outstanding presentation, and I look forward to all of us exercising our opportunity to have a say in how this city is run on November 7th. Be well.
Thank you so much, Representative Goldberg. I just want to, as we close, just want to again remind you that on Monday, October 23rd at 6:30 p.m., Mayor Caroline Simmons will be at Bethel AME Church talking about her vision for Stamford for the next coming years. Be sure to join us on this coming Monday. Listen, that's it. Again, I want to thank everyone who joined in. Special thanks to Representative Jacobson. And listen, we pray that you have a blessed day. All right. You have a great day.
Thank you, Reverend. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you.